Point being,
Yeah.
what does a manager do? Manager is about really guiding your career. And this should be generally, I think, the first stop that someone, particularly in Hollywood, should be trying to get. Now,
today's topic in Shop Talk is the question that many new writers have, which is, what is the difference between having an agent, a manager, and a lawyer? Why do you need all three?
Great
do
question.
You need all three?
Great question.
At what point
should you get what?
Pay them? When do you need what? All of these really great things. I mean, hell, we could do an entire hour long. Maybe we will. But let's go to the basics.
Totally. So typically, a screenwriter starts off with a manager. A manager is able to probably has fewer clients than an agent, and is able to give you much more kind of career-oriented guidance and advice. We get notes from our manager on all of our screenplays. That's not something that we would ever request or expect from an agent, but we get it from our manager.
Right.
Their goal is really, and it's the goal of an agent too, but I would say like the long game. Like, how can we guide your career? Who do you need to be at? Who do you need to meet? They're going to be the ones typically kind of setting up meetings. Now, I think from a legal perspective, and I'm not sure about this, but there's an aspect of like, they're not allowed to procure you work, but I don't really know what that
means. So yes. So according to the WGA, originally, and I don't know where we're at today, but originally, agents were the only ones who were allowed to actually procure you as a writer work. Managers were not.
What does that mean?
Well, what it means is they send you out on jobs or submit you specifically for work.
So specifically for open writing assignments.
Open writing assignments, staffing jobs, things like that.
Got it.
Sending a screenplay out specifically for sale would also probably not be in there. What they were supposed to do, but sending you on a general that turns into work is totally fine.
Totally fine.
So there's a fine line, especially in the screenwriting world versus the TV world.
Yes.
And I think that the one thing that happened when there was this thing that happened a couple of years back where we all fired our agents, and that was a writers guild thing. It was a proactive union. I don't know what you call it.
Union industrial action.
Action. Yes, it was an action whereby we had a dispute with our agents and it's all settled now. It's great. We came to a settle and we all were allowed to go back. But during that time, because agents were the ones who were allowed to procure us work, and certainly we didn't want the writers to not be working, the guild made an exception. And they said, managers, you are now allowed to do everything agents are allowed to do.
Yep.
Funny thing about that is that technically the guild has no authority over managers, because I don't even know that managers there's no manager contract with the union.
No, I don't think there is.
I don't think there is. Now, they could force managers to sign a contract because they, in theory, could tell us as union members that you can't be repped by a non-union.
I wonder if they ever will. It was one of the topics that came up after the agent action was settled, which was managers will be next, because managers will sometimes say, sometimes we've not had this experience, but I'm going to be a producer on this project. But we've heard of it. We know of it. But then there are some other things too. Anyway, we love a manager. It's great. Point being, what does a manager do? Manager is about really guiding your career. And this should be generally, I think, the first stop that someone, particularly in Hollywood, should be trying to get. Now, I don't think in the UK, managers are much of a thing.
And I actually don't know that you would have to go down that road if your goal was staffing.
Yes, that's
I
interesting.
actually think there's a very interesting dynamic between the difference in a TV career trajectory path and a feature film directory path trajectory path. And if you are a writer who is going to apply to be a production assistant or a writer's assistant or somebody on a show, which as a young writer is a fantastic way to break in. I wish I had known about it. You don't need reps for that. There are boards, job boards for that. And then once you're on a show, and you're working not as a staff writer, but as a writer's assistant, the hope is that the people that hired you are going to guide you and nurture you, and then you're going to write an episode. And at that point, you probably could get a TV agent and not need a manager because your career trajectory is kind of, you don't need the same kind of guidance. You're on a path, and what you need at that point is an agent to submit you for new staffing jobs.
Totally. Yeah, for sure. But and again, I'm saying, like, in the UK, the last time I haven't lived in the UK for 15 years, but there was maybe a couple of managers for actors I knew about, but it really wasn't common. It really wasn't common at all. Generally in the UK, it's just agents. So if you're watching this in the UK and you're trying to break in, I think it's probably slightly different over there. I'm not sure how it is in other countries.
Right.
Anyone you don't know. But anyway.
There are writers, it's interesting. So we have a very good friend who is a working writer. He does not have a manager. He only has an agent.
Correct. Yeah.
And
because he's at a point in his career, I think, where he just doesn't need a fucking manager.
Well, I don't know. I think he probably. It's an interesting thing.
Sorry, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I
actually know both versions.
Both versions, yes.
Perhaps smaller writer, and then one like an absolute A-list writer.
Yeah, he doesn't need
a manager,
And that is something that you have to consider. So let's just talk practicalities.
Yes.
An agent and a manager each take 10% of your work, your gross. Some managers used to charge 15%. I don't know of any that do right now. If your manager is trying to charge you 15%, I would say to them that's not standard practice. And if you want to rep me, it should be 10%.
Agreed. I think there may be unscrupulous people out there who might try it.
And the commissions for an agent are set in stone by the guild. Managers are not under that same obligation, so they can charge whatever they want. In theory, they could charge you like an hourly rate,
90%.
They really could, but they don't. Generally speaking,
it's 10%.
And then you then normally would have an attorney as well. And that attorney does something completely different than what we've been talking about with agents and managers. Your attorney is the one person on your team that should have no other agenda other than getting you the best deal possible.
Yes.
Now you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute. I pay my agent 10%. I pay my manager 10%. Shouldn't they be getting me the best deal possible? And the answer is yes.
Should be.
But they don't have a fiduciary legal obligation to not take into consideration their other clients.
And this is it. They may have other clients on your project as attachments.
And we've
experienced this. We experience it all the time. Derek Kolstad and us have the same manager. That's how we
hope that you hope that your reps, and I do believe that our reps are phenomenal and they are looking out for us at every step of the way. But here's the thing. An agent and a manager, they have an obligation to you as a client, but they also have an obligation to their agency or management company. And because their job is based on relationships, they also have an obligation to those relationships.
Yeah.
So it's difficult, like when for an agent or a manager to play super, super hardball with someone that they're actually doing another deal with on another project at the same time, and they're asking for favors on both.
Totally.
And so the nice thing about having a lawyer is they don't give a shit.
And they can play the bad guy.
Yes.
And you should use them to play the bad guy.
Yeah.
The agents and the lawyer, and you might even say like, it's nothing to do with me. Like the lawyer's just doing that, like just doing their thing.
Yeah.
They can play relationship when they need to, but the lawyer will 100% be working for you. And again, we had it was an interesting thing, because we have the same lawyer as Derek.
We do. It's very incestuous.
It was very incestuous, but like she was going, well, so and so is good, and also the same law firm managed the production company.
Yeah, original. They also, her partner managed Neil Moritz, or represented Neil Moritz.
In theory, these conflicts of interest, but there wasn't, and it was great.
Yeah.
But again, ultimately, generally with lawyers, it's great. It's great.
Here's the good thing about having three that I will say. They all have their own. Your lawyer is supposed to only have your best interests and your legal interests in mind.
Yeah.
But if you have an agent and a manager and a lawyer, they're all coming from it from different perspectives for all the reasons that we're talking about. Yes. And so you actually, as a client, can go, you're suggesting this, you're suggesting this, and you're suggesting this. And it gives you a bit of a kind of an ability to be maybe a little broader in your thinking of how to deal with certain situations.
Sure.
Now, when it comes to negotiating your big fee, the top line number, the lawyer is involved, but usually the agent is the one who is going to be getting you the biggest top line figure.
Right.
That's kind of their job.
Sure.
And that's
they do the kind of
they do the dance with the executive. They do the, hey, look, these guys are produced now, they deserve a raise or whatever it is. That's and the reason that is because there's different steps when you're dealing with a studio. And now this may be very different in a independent production world. We don't have a lot of experience in that. We primarily work for studios.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with a studio, you have your creative division, and that is who you're making your initial deal with. You're going to them saying, do you want to buy this?
For this amount of money.
And it might be for this amount of money, or it might just be, yes, business affairs will be in touch.
Right.
That's where the second people come into play. Yeah. Now, every studio has their law division. They call them business affairs.
BA for short.
BA. Business affairs and creative are in contact. Business affairs will say, hey, I just got a call from such and such that we're buying this script from them. How much are we buying this for? And if the creative executive has already made some sort of a big offer, which can happen and also cannot happen depending on what the deal is.
Yeah.
Then they'll go, well, there's a thing called appetite, and they'll get a sense for it. But business affairs job is to pay you as little as possible. And that is literally their job. They get bonuses based on how little they spend.
And it's your lawyer's job at this moment,
right,
to get you as high as possible.
Correct.
And ultimately, you meet in the middle.
And so basically, the dance becomes lawyers and lawyers are talking to each other. Lawyers are making arguments and they're going back and forth.
To be clear, you're not just talking about money. I mean, you are, but all the different actually there are lots of other things.
Everything from bonuses to who owns what rights to how long,
to travel allowances, to per diems if and when you're
that's all lawyer stuff.
All lawyer stuff.
Agents and managers do not negotiate what you're going to get on your, whether you're going to fly business class or first class.
There are all those things that are in a contract.
Yeah.
And you really get into the minutiae details, of going, well, if you fly to set, they're only going to give you X per day. And some of that doesn't matter. And some of it really does.
I'm one of those kind of probably rare people that read every word of these contracts.
Good at it.
But I think, your lawyer is supposed to have a strong grasp over what the industry standards are. The studio will always try and undercut those. It's your lawyer's job to bring them at least back up to industry standard and then hopefully negotiate beyond. Now,
did we say how much a lawyer charges typically?
A lawyer charges 5%.
So to be clear, if you have an agent, a manager, and a lawyer, you are paying out 25% of your gross paycheck. You need to bear that in mind when you are thinking about whether or not you want all of those people in your team. Right. But they all offer incredible value. So you really need to go, well, I don't really want. I mean, here's the thing. Like Ben said earlier, we went for a period of time where we didn't have an agent,
almost 2 years, I think,
and that was fine.
Year and a half, I think we were.
Yeah, it was a period of time. And it was okay. But, agents are connected to other talents. So you really get the benefit of being able to go, oh, they represent this director, they represent this.
If you're at one of the big four.
If you're one of the big four, totally.
But if you're at a smaller agency, then, they then have to communicate with the bigger agencies who represent that talent. Sure. But you're paying... Here, we've had this conversation before, which is we have talked about reps and their value and kind of looking at it from the perspective of, they are essentially equity partners in your business, right? Like they get paid a percentage, a commission on the gross of what your business makes. So they are trying to make you the most money possible. That is true. But none of them are expected to do everything for you either. Yeah, it is very much like it's 25%, and it can add up to a lot of money. But that leaves 75% of getting work, your working job.
Yeah, absolutely right, for sure. I
think another thing to take into consideration is just purely on the financials, nothing to do with this, but you also do pay the guild 1.5% as your union.
Yes, you do.
So they call it the writer tax.
Completely.
And the writer tax is 26.5%.
Absolutely. Now, bear in mind, you are not going to get taxed on that money. That's a write-off. That's a write-off for you.
Yes.
So bear that in mind. Maybe at some point we'll talk about whether or not you should.
If you have a partner, you got to split it 50-50, though.
Exactly, that guy. But again, you have to bear all these things in mind.
Yeah.
I tweeted a thing today, and I stand by it. Once you've then been paid, and we'll talk about that just briefly in a second as well. Once you've been paid, put 30% of it away. Just put 30% of it away. Put it into a high-interest savings account, and forget about it. Pretend you don't have it, because at tax season, you're going to be like, "Oh, I've got that money," and you'll probably have some extra as well. Yeah. Which is great. So you go, oh, it's money I forgot about that I had. But definitely money moment there. When it comes to being paid as well, do we get paid directly and then we pay our agents doing that out, or does it go through a different process?
Generally speaking, either your agency, your manager, or your lawyer, you can choose, will accept all your payments for you and then distribute the commissions accordingly. I think our management company does it. We've had it been where our agents have done it in the past. Now, one thing that you can also take in, a lot of agencies do have legal departments, and they will technically represent you. And if you do not have a lawyer, they will use an agency lawyer and they'll assign it to your particular thing. Yeah. You won't have a personal relationship with that person. And while legally speaking, they're always supposed to be fighting for you and have your best interests at mind, there is a bit of a conflict of interest to use the agency lawyer as your lawyer. But, they're still fighting for you to get the most possible because it makes the agent the best. I mean, we've talked about, do we just use the agency lawyer? There was one point in time where we did not have a lawyer. And I don't know. Technically, I don't even think you have to pay the 5% if you use the agency lawyer. I think it's included in your 10% fee.
Yeah, probably is. Yeah.
Well, you're not going to
get. Have we? We've always had a lawyer.
We've never done it, and every lawyer we've ever talked to has done it the same way. I've always had an outside attorney. It's nice to feel like you can call someone who is completely 100% just for you.
Indeed, it is.
But it costs you money. And we've had moments in time where we've wondered, is the 10% for the agent worth it? Is the 5% for the lawyer worth it? Are we getting all, your money's worth? I think those, at the end of the day, though, become high-class problems.
Yeah, they do.
If you have the ability to pay 25% off of whatever you're making. Now, that being said, if you're a writer who is making scale, which means the WGA union minimums, and you're taking 25% off the top, and you're in a partnership and then splitting it, you're probably working a support job too. And that can get very, very frustrating. I mean, imagine what our salary would look like if we sold a movie at scale and then had to take everything out. That's not sustainable. So it does become complicated. I think that the benefits that you usually see, agents and managers, both of them, you're wanting to benefit from their relationships. They both bring that to the table. Agents will have hopefully the strongest sense of the pulse of the industry in terms of, because they have these massive meetings where everybody basically says like what's going on, and they're going to know from these staff meetings, like, they've so many clients that there's such a more kind of understanding of what's going on. If you have a manager, they're going to have a smaller client list. They're going to be able to give you more personalized attention. They should also have a sense of what's going on in the industry. If you're at a bigger management company, they will also have these bigger staff meetings whereby they're going to learn more as well. The more information you have, the better. So combining those two only makes that stronger.
Absolutely, for sure.
And then in this day and age where packaging is essential, access to talent is important.
Very helpful.
But not, like I said, like smaller agents can still be beneficial even if they can't package internally.
Sure. It's all about relationship. All about relationship. Your agent at a slightly smaller agency may have been a bigger agent at another, or knows people. It's like
he just knows a lot of people. Look, their job is to know people and know what's going on and be really good on the phone and get shit done. If your agent at a smaller agency is really good friends with 5 presidents of studios, it's a great agent to have.
Absolutely right.
And talent wants to work. So you can get to talent in lots of different ways. So that's kind of, I think, a broad breakdown of the difference.
I think that's very good.
And I think that, look, we're happy to answer any more questions if we didn't touch on things about agents, managers, and lawyers.